Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we convene our first session uh, once a week. We're now convening Humanity Rising every Friday as a weekly wrap up after 4 years of doing it 5 days a week, as you know. And so we're very pleased that you're joining us. We hope that you'll continue your support of Humanity Rising. And every week, I'm going to provide comments on unfolding world events, not only at the level of politics and economics and war and peace, but also at the level of the revolutions taking place in human consciousness, human spirituality, through artificial intelligence, and of course, with our uh, entering of our cosmic moment. Today, I want to just note that in the Christian calendar, this day marks Good Friday. And I want to begin here and then expand into some considerations of our contemporary situation, because I think that Good Friday demarcates a fundamentally important departure point for what is going on in the Middle East today, but in other areas of the world. And I want to recall, just so we're all on the same page, because in our increasingly secular society, we often forget what these great religious and historic commemorative days mean sometimes. And with Good Friday, what we are commemorating is the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth on the third hour, as it's said in the scriptures. They think that was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, about 2,000 years ago. A young Jewish man in his early 30s was crucified by the Roman soldiers outside of Jerusalem. The Romans had come to the crucifixion, according to the stories, somewhat unwillingly, because the governor of Judea at that time, a man by the name of Pontius Pilate, had interrogated Jesus and found no fault in him. But the Jewish elders, the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the Levites, who ruled the religious theocracy of Judaism and the Jewish people at that time, since there was no king, uh, challenged Pontius Pilate and said that he was a heretic, a blasphemer, and essentially that if Pontius Pilate did not execute him, they were willing to take the matter to higher levels. So Pontius Pilate, even though his wife had had a dream that Jesus was innocent, in the end, for political considerations, he asked one of his attendant slaves to bring him a basin of water, and he washed his hands of the whole matter and ordered the execution of an innocent man. I want to tease out some points in the story of Jesus that are often missed, that I think are relevant in our own time. It's worth remembering that last Sunday, 2,000 years ago, called Palm Sunday in the Christian calendar, Jesus had come into Jerusalem riding on a donkey, heralded by the people of Jerusalem as the Messiah. And that's worth reflecting on at two levels. One, what would cause them to do that? And two, how did it happen that between Sunday, when he was hailed as a Messiah, and Friday, when they were crucifying him, how did that transposition happen in only a matter of a few days? One of the facts about Jesus's life that is often missed in our adoration of the man as a pure and unblemished sacrifice in the crucifixion is that Jesus was actually a man of great, shall I say, violence. And I want to dwell on that for a moment because I think it's very important in understanding Palm Sunday and the crucifixion. Jesus, in his very brief ministry of no more than 2.5 to 3 years, when he burst onto the scene after the baptism by John the Baptist, who, to the astonishment of the people of that time, who thought that John the Baptist was the potential Messiah because of his defiance of King Herod, for which, as you all know from your Bible stories, John the Baptist was eventually beheaded at the suggestion of King Herod's daughter, Salome, who danced before King Herod with such grace and sensuality that he said to her, "I'll give you anything as a thanks for your dance." And she said, "Bring me the head of John the Baptist on a platter." And like Pontius Pilate, with great sorrow, he had John the Baptist executed. But during his ministry, John the Baptist would baptize people. And Jesus, on one occasion, came to John the Baptist to be baptized. And John the Baptist said to him, "I'm not worthy to baptize you. I'm not even worthy to tie your shoelaces." And Jesus said, "But nevertheless, you need to baptize me." And that really was the opening of Jesus's ministry, because at that point, Jesus then went out. And his first miracle, as you may remember from your Bible stories, is to change water into wine at the marriage feast of a friend of his. And then there was this strange little vignette that nobody yet has been able to fully explain. At the behest of his mother, he changed the water into wine. And then he made the comment that, "Who is my mother but those who do the will of God?" So even at the beginning of his ministry, there was this disconnect between Jesus and the prevailing institutional order, both in terms of family. I come not to bring peace, but a sword, and to cut the relationship between husband and wife, and father and son, and mother and daughter, and brothers and sisters. And there's the story of Jesus coming to the fig tree and being hungry. And the fig tree bore no fruit because it wasn't in season. And Jesus cursed the fig tree, and it shriveled up and died. And Jesus' disciples said to him, "Master, what are you doing? The fig tree was out of season." And Jesus says, "That ye may know the power of the Son of Man." Another story of when he went up to Galilee and entered a village, and three insane people came up to him, possessed of evil spirits. And Jesus cast out the evil spirits. And the spirit said to him, "Don't kill us, don't kill us, don't kill us." Jesus said, "Okay." And with a twist of his hand, the evil spirits went into a herd of pigs, several thousand pigs, and possessed the herd of pigs and drove them off the cliff to their death into the sea. People were so startled that they came out and begged Jesus to leave their coasts and to just stop doing whatever it is that he was doing. And he returned to Judea. And in the course of the ministry, what began to take place was led to Palm Sunday and the crucifixion, was an increasingly antagonistic relationship with the religious leaders of the day. It wasn't amicable. It was highly adversarial. And according to the scriptures, Jesus was the protagonist of the antagonism, going into the temple and casting out the money changers and calling the religious leaders, the ministers of the day, white-coated sepulchres, white-coated tombs, hypocrites that would burn in Hades. And so they conspired to kill him. And so the political machinations that were taking place in and around his acts of power, controlling the weather, casting out demons, healing the sick, raising the dead, walking on water, was all intertwined with a hostility and a belligerence against the established order of a people who were already under the Roman colonial yoke. And Jesus burst like a grenade in the middle of all that. And so there was this split in the psyche between those who said, "This is Messiah. Anybody who can do what this man is doing has got to be the Son of God." And those that said, "He's a troublemaker and is establishing a new way of being. So Jesus didn't get crucified because of his Sermon on the Mount. Had he only done that, he probably would have lived to a ripe old age. He was crucified. He was executed due to an antagonism that could not be tolerated by a religious and political class that was trying to navigate through the colonial Roman yoke and preserve the status quo. I'm sure this is only a fraction of what actually took place as one of the great avatars of history interacted in the midst of the constraints of colonialism. After Jesus came into Jerusalem, hailed as the Messiah, and they cut the palm leaf trees and the big branches of the palm trees and laid them on the road as he entered into the city. And then he went to the house of a friend of his and supped. The Last Supper. And at the Last Supper, he, as you all remember, turned at one point to Judas and said, "What thou doest, do quickly." Judas left and began to conspire with the Sadducees and the Pharisees about betraying Jesus because they were afraid of him because he's very popular. They knew he was a man of great power. So how do you capture a man like that? It's not so easy. You got to think about it. Then it's said, and this is the point that I want to tease out of this story. Jesus went to a nearby garden, a garden called Gethsemane, with his disciples. And his three closest disciples, Peter, James, and John, he asked to go deeper into the garden to pray with him. And Jesus went into a state of such inner stress, such inner anxiety and tension, that it is said that he sweat drops of blood in his state because he knew what was going to happen to him. And in some mysterious way, he understood that what was about ready to take place was an act of God. That in some way past his understanding as a good man, teaching people to love each other as they love themselves, that he was destined to die a violent death. He said, "Oh, Father, Abba, take this cup from me." And the answer that came back was no. And then Jesus on his knees, said, "Not my will, but thine be done." Not my will, but thine be done. And he got up, went out to see that Peter, James, and John were fast asleep, as were the other disciples. So right at that moment when history was turning, an event that would be remembered to the present day, the people that were closest to him, his own disciples, were fast asleep. Think about that. We're in one of the most momentous moments in all of human history. How many of us are awake? How many of us are just going along, minding our own business, thinking about what we're going to have for dinner tonight and what we're going to do with the kids on the weekend? You know, when you think about the 1960s, my generation, momentous in every way. And most of us went through it asleep. We read about it now. But most of us are sleepwalking. We're in Plato's cave, looking at the back of the cave, thinking that the shadows are what's really happening. And whether we're going to get the next iPhone or computer, that's what's important. Not my will, but thine be done. This recognition that when history moves, it is not by human choice. It is through submission of human will to a higher order will, not our own, that is willing even to sacrifice us for a will and a purpose beyond our capacity to comprehend. And I want to dwell on this for a moment because I believe more and more I'm beginning to understand the outer layers of the constraints within which what we consider to be free will actually takes place. We think our free will is what we're contemplating in our conscious minds. And we make choices all the time. But I think what's beginning to emerge phenomenologically with greater and greater force is that we are actually very small little nodes, like cells in a body. And the cell makes certain choices, but it's within body systems over which it has absolutely no control. And is participating in processes that started long before it was even born and will continue long after it's gone. And so for that momentary effervescence that is the life of the cell, it may think It's making choices. And it does. But its choice is not as we think it is, choosing A or B. But our choice is whether we submit, as Jesus did in Gethsemane, to a will not our own. If we don't, that's when dis-ease happens. If we do, we become instruments of history. And as instruments of history, we find a purpose that's transcendent to our finitude. And that is where we find the solace of ultimate meaning for why we were even brought into life in the first place. And once he knew that his task was to submit, that's when Judas shows up with the Roman soldiers to arrest him. And you may recall from the story that Peter drew his sword, which is interesting to observe that Jesus' disciples wore swords, and cut off the ear of one of the Roman soldiers. And Jesus rebuked him. He said, Peter, put down your sword. And he reached out and fixed the man's ear with his hand, Jesus did, and healed him on the spot. And meekly and without resistance, the man who controlled the winds and could exercise power over nature and people, even death, went meekly with the Romans. And surrendered to his crucifixion. It's an extraordinary story. You really take in the profundity of the levels of both power and submission. As we reflect on Good Friday today, I want to contemplate several of the issues with which we're dealing. And I think where I want to go is to Gaza. Gaza is where, on this day, as we speak, a crucifixion is taking place upon the innocent. Yesterday was Palestinian Prisoner Day, where even under the incessant mass slaughter of the Israelis, the Palestinian people still rose up and demonstrated and remembered the 1 million Palestinians that have been detained. And that doesn't even count the number of Palestinians who have completely disappeared at the hands of the Israelis since 1948. 10,000 Palestinians, including many, many children and women, are right now in detention in Israeli concentration camps, being abused and tortured and starved. Every once in a while, you hear the name of some Palestinian who's died in the detention camp. The last one died of starvation. The latest reports are that the Israelis they've run out of buildings to bomb, hospitals to bomb, cemeteries to bomb, sanitation, stores to bomb. So they're now bombing the Palestinians in their tents, just blowing up tents and blowing up families. The genocide of Palestine is the crucifixion of our time. And that's why I call it the crime of crimes. And even as 2,000 years ago, it was the leaders that crucified Jesus, the Jewish leaders and the Roman leaders. That's what we have today. The Netanyahu government and the US government colluding, as the Romans and the Jewish elders did back then, are doing it now. And just as the Jewish leaders said to Pontius Pilate, we're under the Roman yoke. We can't crucify. We can't execute. You have to do it. So Netanyahu and the Zionists are saying to the Americans, we can't do this on our own. We don't have enough weapons. We don't have enough fighter jets and tanks and 2,000-pound bombs to blow these people up. You do it. We want all of our arsenal to say, made in USA. And a deeper point, the same people who hailed Jesus as Messiah were crucifying, calling for his crucifixion from the streets. So the crucifixion of the Palestinians enjoys, if I could use that word, overwhelming public support by the people of Israel and world Jewry. They're cheering. They may have some problems with Netanyahu because he's more concerned with the genocide than saving the hostages. But the people who want the hostages back don't want the killing of the Palestinians to stop. And the control of the Israel lobby and the Zionists over the US government is complete, as we all know. And within this context, we have to ponder a question. Where in this is any kind of divine purpose? Any kind of deeper meaning? When the people who endured genocide in the 1940s are now committing genocide in the 2020s. How does one think about that? In the same way, how do you, 2,000 years ago, think of the man who uttered the Sermon on the Mount and healed people was being tortured to death? How do you think that thought and derive meaning? Because in some mysterious way, the purposes of history itself may be being served at a level that we cannot even imagine. And yet we're compelled as people of the light, as people of the spirit, to hold the contradictions in our psyche and soul. And it is literally our capacity to hold these contradictions in the spirit of T.S. Eliot. You know, his great lines in the four quartets. I said to my soul, be still. And let the darkness of God come upon you. I said to my soul, be still. And wait without hope, because you're not ready for hope. Wait without love, because you're not yet ready for love. Wait without faith, because the hope and the love and the faith are in the waiting. Wait without thought, for you are not ready for thought. And the darkness shall become the light. And the stillness, the dancing, are we able to wait without hope, without love, without faith, without thought? while the gears of history turn all around us, grinding some up, elevating those who have no right to lead, and bringing down upon the anvil the innocent. Good Friday takes us to this depth of existential truth about the complexity that makes up the human domain. An innocent man nailed to a cross before the crowds with his mother and Mary Magdalene and the other Mary at the foot of the cross. That had such an impact that it is said that even the sun stood still. The Palestinians that were last night in their tents, blown up, entire families, completely defenseless as Jesus was. We move into a realm beyond understanding. In another part of the four quartets, Eliot gives us a little glimmer of that transposition. He says, the doves descending break the air with flames of incandescent terror, of which the tongues declare our only discharge from sin and error. We only live, we only suspire to be consumed by fire or fire. Who then devised this torment? This was Jesus's deeper insight. Who then devised this torment? Love. Love is the unfamiliar name that wove the intolerable shirt of flame that no human power can remove. Love is the unfamiliar name that wove the intolerable shirt of fire that no human hands can remove. Our only hope, or else despair, is to be redeemed from fire by fire. That, to me, is the essence of Good Friday, which on this day I dedicate to the people of Palestine. So thank you, everyone, for joining us here on Humanity Rising. I'll be back next Friday with other reflections on the ever-changing events of our world. Today, I just felt more meditative, and I hope that my thoughts will both bring provocation and consolation as we grapple with a time like the time 2,000 years ago, where great events are taking place. Let us not fall asleep. Let us stay awake. Thank you, everyone. That'll bring us to a close. You can join me in the after chat. I'll stay for a bit. You'll see the link in the chat box, and you receive the link in your Zoom reminder for today. And then every Friday, I'll be back. And sometimes I'll just interview someone, as I've done many, many times on Humanity Rising. Sometimes I'll just provide a commentary. We'll let you know week by week as things unfold. Thank you, everyone. Happy Good Friday. Bye for now.